All right, so we've got a pretty hefty stack of stuff here, all about the science of identity foundation.
Yeah, looks like a deep dive for sure.
It is articles, court documents, forum,
Mm.
posts, you name it. Looks like you really want to get a handle on this organization,
Absolutely.
especially how they're operating in different countries.
Right.
Poland, Australia. There's a lot swirling around their leader, too, this Chris Butler guy. Ready to unpack all this?
Yeah, let's get into it.
Okay, so one thing that jumps out right away is how SIF uses things like yoga and meditation to draw people in.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We see this with their international offshoots, like mantra.pl in Poland
Mm-hmm.
and the Australian School of Meditation.
Yeah, those names sound pretty approachable, right?
They do?
But it kind of masks some of the more controversial aspects of the group that are starting to come up in these sources.
Right, so like they're trying to fly under the radar almost,
Yeah.
using
Yeah.
these seemingly harmless activities to attract people who might not otherwise be interested in their religious teachings.
Yeah.
But then if we believe what former members are saying, things get a bit more complicated.
Yeah.
They allege there's manipulation, exploitation, and even a culture of fear once you're in.
Right. And that's where Chris Butler, the leader of SIF, comes in.
Okay.
He's presented as this charismatic guru figure who preaches this like unique blend of IS-Can beliefs or Hare Krishna beliefs. But ex-members paint a different picture.
Yeah.
They're accusing him of hypocrisy, financial impropriety, and even fostering that culture of fear and control that we just mentioned.
I'm seeing some pretty unsettling anecdotes in these forum posts.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like one where a former member describes how Butler would demand that this particular disciple wear a bag over his head
What?
because he couldn't stand the sight of him.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty out there.
Yeah, it's important to acknowledge that these are accusations.
Of course.
And Butler hasn't publicly addressed these specific claims.
Right.
But they do point to a pattern of behavior that we need to examine more closely.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Okay, so let's talk about QNEC. It's this multi-level marketing company that has faced accusations of being a pyramid scheme.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this connection to SIF so important?
Well, it's crucial because several key figures associated with SIF seem to have strong ties to QAnon.
Okay.
This includes individuals like Alan Tibby, who went by Acharya Das within SIF. And one former member even claims that QAnon is essentially used as a funding source for SIF,
Really?
with members encouraged to join and recruit others.
Wow.
They also allege that work done for QNet businesses is often framed as service to God, even if it's unpaid or exploitative.
That's pretty powerful. If you believe your work is directly benefiting a higher purpose, you might be more willing to overlook certain things,
Yeah.
like unfair labor practices or something.
Absolutely.
It makes you think about how SIF uses language to shape people's perceptions. Like we talked about earlier, calling their centers things like mantra.pl or the Australian School of Meditation.
Right.
Makes them seem less intimidating, more
Yeah.
accessible, right?
Exactly. And these introductory courses they offer on things like meditation and yoga,
Yeah.
they act as a gateway to expose individuals to Butler's teachings, often without revealing his full background
Right.
or the more controversial aspects of SIF.
Interesting.
It's only when someone is drawn in that the pressure to commit more deeply, both personally and financially, seems to increase.
And they seem to use a variety of tactics to reinforce their message, like subliminal indoctrination, through constantly playing Butler's chants,
Wow.
promoting Wailana yoga videos that feature his chanting under the name Siddha, even encouraging the consumption of prasadam.
Prashadam.
Yeah, I had to look that one up.
Okay.
It's food that's been spiritually blessed according to their beliefs.
Interesting.
SIF seems to believe exposing non-believers, or karmists, as they call them,
Karmas.
meaning those who haven't reached enlightenment to these
Okay.
things will somehow make them more receptive to their message.
Huh.
It's a very subtle form of persuasion,
Yeah.
relying on repetition and association to influence people's subconscious.
Right.
So we're starting to see a pattern here.
Yeah.
SEF uses these seemingly harmless activities to attract people,
Mm-hmm.
then slowly introduces them to Butler's teachings and this whole system of beliefs.
Right.
But what happens if someone tries to leave or speak out against the group?
Well, that's where things get even more concerning.
Okay.
Many ex-members describe feeling isolated and controlled within SEF.
Mm-hmm.
They talk about being pressured to cut ties with family and friends who question the group.
Wow.
They say criticism of Chris Butler was absolutely forbidden,
Really?
and doubting his teachings was seen as a sign of spiritual weakness.
It sounds like a classic cult tactic.
Yeah.
Create an us versus them mentality, demonize the outside world, and make leaving seem like the ultimate betrayal.
Right.
But how did they manage to maintain this level of control, especially with branches in different countries?
Well, that's where figures like Alan Tibby, or Acharya Das, as he was known within SIF, come in.
Okay.
He was deeply involved in SIF's operations, particularly in Australia and New Zealand, and played a crucial role in establishing the Australian School of Meditation.
Right, which uses a similar model to mantra.pl in Poland.
Exactly.
And his connection to QNet raises even more red flags.
Yeah.
Especially considering QNet's legal troubles and the accusations of it being a pyramid scheme.
Yes, and although Tibby has denied any involvement in QNet's alleged wrongdoings, numerous sources, including court documents, suggest otherwise.
This alleged connection to QNet, a company accused of operating as a pyramid scheme, raises serious ethical questions about SIF's financial practices.
For sure.
It's one of the many things about this organization that feels intentionally obscured.
Yeah, like they're operating under this veil of secrecy.
Right.
Different names, an alleged funding source through QNet, strict rules that discourage dissent. It definitely makes you wonder about their true motives.
It does. But there's one detail that I found particularly intriguing.
Oh, yeah.
It's mentioned in passing in a couple of these forum posts about Tibby's daughter allegedly giving Chris Butler massages.
That's interesting.
It's a seemingly small detail, but it raises questions about the power dynamics within SIF.
Yeah.
And how Butler was viewed and treated by his followers.
For sure. There are also allegations of financial impropriety against Tibby, particularly within SIF's operations in India.
It's like peeling back layers of an onion. The deeper you go, the more complicated and unsettling it gets.
Yeah, and then there's Patrick Bowler.
Oh yeah, the convicted drug dealer.
Right, the alleged SIF member.
Some sources even claim he was involved at the SIF school in Baguio, Philippines.
That's right, and that school in Baguio where, according to your sources, children of SIF followers were sent.
Yeah.
Seems to be a recurring theme in these accounts.
It does.
It's described as being run with a very strict, almost militaristic approach.
Wow.
And some former members have even alleged abuse and cover-ups taking place there.
It seems like this school is a key piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, it's pretty disturbing that, according to these sources, Butler defended Bowler within the group.
I know, right?
Referring to him as a great devotee of Krishna.
Yeah, all of this paints a pretty troubling picture of SIF's operations.
You're absolutely right. We're seeing how this organization has potentially used spiritual teachings, manipulative tactics, and complex business ventures to gain influence and control.
Yeah.
And that school in the Philippines seems to be a particularly dark chapter in their history.
This is where things start to get really interesting.
Okay.
There's still so much more to uncover.
Right.
And I'm particularly curious about SIF's reach into politics and how that ties into everything we've discussed so far.
Well, in the next part of our deep dive, we'll delve further into those political connections.
Okay.
Particularly the involvement of the Gabbard family.
All right.
And explore the ethical concerns raised by ex-members in even more detail.
Sounds good. I'm ready when you are.
Let's do it. Welcome back. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, we start to see a pattern of SIF seeking influence in various spheres, including politics. And this brings us to the Gabbard family. And specifically, Tulsi Gabbard, the former U.S. representative and presidential candidate.
Right. This is where the SIF story takes a fascinating turn.
It does.
The sources you sent over reveal that Tulsi Gabbard's parents were devoted followers of Chris Butler.
Wow.
She even grew up in the group. There are photos of her at SIF events, chanting and participating in rituals. It definitely makes you wonder about the group's potential influence on her political career.
It's important to acknowledge that Tulsi Gabbard has distanced herself from SIF in recent years.
Okay.
She stated that her personal religious beliefs are separate from her political career.
Right.
But the sources you've provided, including forum posts from ex-members and articles from reputable news sources, suggest a deeper connection that's worth exploring.
There's this one article that mentions her sending a video birthday message to Chris Butler in 2015.
Oh, wow.
Where she refers to him as Guru Dev.
Guru Dev.
Which means spiritual master.
Interesting.
It doesn't really sound like someone who's completely cut ties.
That's a good point. It's one of the many inconsistencies that emerge when you compare Gabbard's statements with the information presented in these sources.
Yeah.
For example, she's claimed that her father's Catholic. However, several sources, including ex-members and journalists who have investigated SIF, present evidence to the contrary.
Wild.
Yeah.
And then there are these financial connections between SIF and the Gabbards, too.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Mike Gabbard, Tulsi's father, was elected to the Senate for Hawaii in 2006. and the sources allege that nearly all of his campaign contributions came from SEF members.
Wow.
If that's true, it raises some serious questions about potential undue influence.
Absolutely. If a significant portion of a politician's financial support comes from a single organization,
Right.
it's natural to question whether that organization might try to influence the politician's decisions.
And there are allegations that Chris Butler would actually direct his followers to support specific candidates, regardless of their political party.
Right.
Yeah, it sounds like he was more interested in gaining political power than aligning with a specific ideology.
Wow, that's interesting.
It's a bit unsettling to think that an organization with such controversial practices could be wielding that kind of influence in politics.
Yeah.
What are the implications of this, especially for those who may have voted for Tulsi Gabbard without knowing about her background?
It's a complex question,
Yeah.
and one that each listener will have to grapple with on their own.
Sure.
The point of this deep dive isn't to tell you what to think,
Of course.
but rather to give you the information you need to form your own informed opinions.
You've brought up some great points. There's also this connection between SEF and the Healthy Hawaii Coalition,
Okay.
a group that's been pushing anti-LGBTQ plus legislation.
Right.
Mike Gabbard was a key figure in this coalition, and some sources suggest that his involvement was directly influenced by Chris Butler and SIF's teachings.
That makes sense. It's another example where concerns about SIF's ideology potentially influencing public policy come into play. It's essential for voters to be aware of these connections.
Absolutely.
And to critically evaluate the motivations behind political movements and the individuals who lead them.
It's starting to feel like SIF is this hidden force operating behind the scenes,
Yeah.
using different tactics to advance its agenda.
Mm-hmm.
When you first start reading about it, it sounds like a conspiracy theory.
Right.
But then you look at the evidence court documents, financial records, first-hand accounts from ex-members, and it's hard to dismiss.
That's the challenge with groups like SIF.
Yeah.
They often operate in a way that makes it difficult to separate fact from fiction. They use vague language, deny accusations,
Right.
and cultivate a culture of secrecy.
Yeah.
It makes it really difficult for outsiders to understand what their true motives are.
It's a perfect example of why critical thinking is so important,
Absolutely.
especially today when information is so readily available but not always reliable.
Yeah, we need to be skeptical. We need to question assumptions and look for evidence to support claims. And that's precisely what we're doing with this deep dive.
Right.
We're not just accepting these sources at face value.
Of course not.
We're analyzing them, comparing different perspectives,
Yeah.
and looking for patterns and connections to help us understand the bigger picture.
One pattern that's emerging is how SEF uses front groups and aliases to hide its involvement.
Oh, interesting.
The Healthy Hawaii Coalition is one
Right.
example,
Right.
but we see it in their business ventures too.
Okay.
Remember Down to Earth, the vegetarian grocery chain?
Yeah, I love Down to Earth.
Me too.
Yeah.
But Down to Earth is owned by Healthy's Inc.,
Okay.
which has strong financial ties to SIF. In fact, one of SIF's tax returns shows that they earned a significant portion of their profit from selling Healthy's Inc. stock.
So even though Down to Earth might seem like a harmless, even beneficial business, it could potentially be used to funnel money back to SIF.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And customers who shop there, maybe without knowing about these connections, could be unknowingly supporting an organization they would find objectionable.
It's a classic example of how SIF uses seemingly innocuous activities to further its goals.
Right.
We see this same pattern in their recruitment methods, using yoga and meditation as a way to attract people.
Speaking of money, there's another interesting detail about Joseph Bismark.
Joseph Bismark.
Yeah, he's the managing director of QI Group, a company closely linked to QNet.
Okay.
He's also described as a longtime devotee of Chris Butler.
Interesting.
And this is where it gets really weird. Bismark owns 2 homes in Kailua, Oahu, that are allegedly used by Butler and his disciples for residential and business purposes.
What?
He even listed the Science of Identity University as his education on his Google Plus page.
Seriously?
Yeah, so it's starting to feel very interconnected.
I know, right?
SIF, QNet, QI Group, Down to Earth, the Gabbards. It's like this intricate web of relationships and financial ties that all lead back to Chris Butler.
And that's the key takeaway here.
Yeah.
This deep dive has revealed that SIF is not just a small, isolated religious group.
Right?
It's an organization with a complex network of influence reaching into business politics and even potentially shaping public policy.
There's also this detail about Chris Butler allegedly claiming that he's more humble than anyone even his own guru,
What?
and that his disciples make him sick.
Oh my gosh.
It just seems to add another layer to this concerning picture we're seeing.
Those quotes, if accurate, reveal a disturbing level of arrogance and disdain for his followers.
Right.
It's a stark contrast to the image of a benevolent spiritual leader that Sif presents to the public.
Yeah.
And the stories about his extravagant lifestyle, living in a mansion while demanding his followers adhere to strict rules.
Right.
And donate a large portion of their income just add another layer to this troubling picture.
It's important to remember that these are accusations from ex-members. However, the sheer number of accusations combined with the evidence presented in other sources paints a picture that's hard to ignore.
You're absolutely right. And there's the question of the school in Baguio.
Yeah.
We touched on it earlier, but some of the allegations surrounding that school are very disturbing.
Yes, the sources describe a culture of fear and abuse at the school.
Wow.
Children were allegedly subjected to harsh punishments, isolation, and even sexual abuse.
It's incredibly troubling to hear these accounts.
It is.
And it raises serious questions about whether Sif adequately protected the children in their care.
And then there's the allegation of sexual abuse at the school.
Right.
One source describes how Cittabel Butler's stepson was accused of molesting other boys there.
This alleged incident is particularly troubling.
Yeah.
Because it raises questions about whether Sif leadership was aware of the abuse and whether they took appropriate steps to protect the children.
One source claims that instead of reporting the abuse to the authorities, the school staff allegedly held an all-night interrogation session, forcing the boys to confess their sins before an altar.
Oh my gosh, that's awful.
It's a chilling example of how SIF allegedly prioritized protecting its image and control over its members, even at the expense of children's safety.
These allegations of abuse cover-ups and a culture of silence within SIF warrant further investigation.
I agree.
They highlight the potential dangers of unchecked power within closed religious groups and the importance of holding leaders accountable for their actions.
The fact that Tulsi Gabbard spent 2 years at this school as a child adds another layer of complexity to this whole story.
Yeah, it does.
Whether or not she was personally subjected to or witnessed any of this alleged abuse,
Right.
it's clear that she grew up in an environment deeply influenced by Chris Butler's teachings and SIF's ideology.
It's a reminder that our childhood experiences, especially those within intensely religious or ideological groups, can have a profound impact on our values and beliefs, even as we mature and develop our own sense of identity.
This deep dive has uncovered some truly unsettling information. We've looked at SIF's history, its alleged practices, and the web of influence it has spun.
Right.
It's a complex story filled with contradictions, accusations, and unanswered questions.
But as we wrap up, the essential questions remain.
Okay.
How do groups like SIF exploit the human need for belonging and purpose? What are the red flags of undue influence?
Right.
And how can we protect ourselves and others from potentially harmful groups?
These are questions that each of us must grapple with, especially in a world where information, misinformation, and manipulation are constantly vying for our attention.
This exploration leaves us with more than answers.
Yeah.
It leaves us with a responsibility.
A responsibility.
A responsibility to be discerning, to think critically,
Okay.
and to question those who claim to hold the ultimate truth.
Remember, the journey of discovery continues, and you are now equipped to ask the tough questions and navigate this complex world with greater awareness and a commitment to truth. So we've uncovered a lot about the Science of Identity Foundation, their practices, their network, the accusations surrounding Chris Butler.
Definitely a lot to unpack.
To really understand where SIF is today, though, I think we need to go back to their roots.
I think you're right. Examining SIF's origins can help us understand their activities today.
Okay.
So Chris Butler, originally known as Cy Young, established his following back in the late 1960s in Hawaii, attracting devotees with this blend of yoga and Eastern mysticism.
It's interesting that he was a self-proclaimed guru even before encountering the Hare Krishna movement.
Yeah.
He was just a young surfer in Hawaii, but he had this charisma that drew people to him.
His charisma combined with his teachings proved to be potent.
Yeah.
In the early 1970s, Butler's group connected with ISKCON, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, bringing a sizable donation and a large group of followers when they initially joined.
But it seems like that partnership wasn't meant to last.
Right.
Butler had his own ideas about how things should be run.
Exactly. Butler rose quickly within ISKCON, but he also began clashing with other leaders.
Okay.
He had a different interpretation of ISKCON's teachings and wasn't shy about expressing his disagreements. This ultimately led to a split, with Butler and his followers breaking away to form what would become the Science of Identity Foundation.
And if these sources are accurate, this wasn't a peaceful parting of ways.
It sounds messy.
Butler was publicly criticizing other ISKCON leaders,
Oh, wow.
accusing them of corruption and straying from the true path.
Really?
Yeah, he even claimed that he was the only true successor to Prabhupada ISKCON's founder.
It seems like a power grab.
It does, right?
Especially since this all happened shortly after Prabhupada's death.
Exactly.
That's certainly one interpretation, and it's supported by some of the information in these sources.
Okay.
After the split, Butler quickly started establishing his own unique set of rules and doctrines, deviating significantly from traditional ISKCON practices.
And he started demanding that his followers call him Jagad Guru,
Jagat Guru!
which basically means world teacher.
That's a pretty bold title.
It is, especially considering his relatively short time within the Hare Krishna movement.
It definitely points to his ambition and desire for authority.
Yeah.
And it's this desire for control, coupled with the allegations of financial impropriety and exploitation, that raise those ethical concerns about Sif.
Right. Let's circle back to that school in the Philippines.
Okay.
The sources paint a very disturbing picture of what allegedly went on there.
The Baguio school, established in the late 1980s, appears to have been Butler's attempt to create a space specifically for indoctrinating the children of his followers. It operated as a boarding school, isolating children from their families and the outside world.
Former students who attended the school describe a very harsh environment.
Really?
Strict rules, physical punishments, and a constant emphasis on obedience to Chris Butler.
Wow.
They were allegedly made to listen to his tape-recorded lectures, which were, according to them, filled with homophobic and hateful rhetoric.
These allegations are deeply concerning.
They are.
It seems that children at the school were essentially treated as miniature devotees, subjected to a level of control and indoctrination that many would consider abusive.
And then there's the horrifying allegation of sexual abuse at the school.
Oh, gosh.
One source described how Siddha Bellord Butler's stepson was accused of molesting other boys at the school.
This alleged incident is particularly troubling.
It is.
It raises questions about whether Sif leadership knew about the abuse and if they took steps to protect the children in their care.
One source even claims that instead of reporting the abuse to authorities, the school staff held an all-night interrogation session,
No way.
forcing the boys to confess their sins before an altar.
That is awful.
It's a chilling example of how SIF may have prioritized protecting its image and maintaining control, even at the expense of children's safety.
These allegations of abuse, cover-ups, and a culture of silence demand further investigation.
Yeah.
They highlight the potential dangers of unchecked power within closed religious groups and the need to hold leaders accountable.
The fact that Tulsi Gabbard spent 2 years at this school as a child adds another layer of complexity to this story.
It does.
Whether or not she experienced or witnessed any of this alleged abuse, it's clear she grew up immersed in Chris Butler's teachings and SIF's ideology.
Yeah.
It makes you think about how our early experiences, especially within intensely religious or ideological groups, can shape our values and beliefs, even as we grow and form our own identities.
You've hit on a crucial point. This deep dive has taken us deep into the world of SIF.
It has.
We've seen its alleged practices, the network of influence it's built, and the disturbing accusations that have surfaced.
It's a complicated story with contradictions, accusations, and many unanswered questions.
But it leaves us with some essential questions to ponder.
What are those?
How do groups like SIF take advantage of people's need for belonging and purpose? What are the warning signs of undue influence? And how can we protect ourselves and others from potentially harmful groups?
These are questions we all need to consider, especially in a world saturated with information, misinformation, and manipulation.
This deep dive has given you a lot to think about. It's a reminder to stay vigilant, to think critically, and to question those who claim to hold the ultimate truth. Remember, the journey of discovery continues, and you're now equipped to ask those tough questions and navigate the world with more awareness and a commitment to truth.